Most of what goes routinely wrong in the United States has copious things written about it, some of which is dissembling or incomplete, but all of which usually focuses on some particular aspect of what goes wrong, like nativism, racism, um, educational bias, economic exclusion, job opportunities inequality. That's a variety of things. Of course, you know all of this already. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. But, we get into it working out what the half truths are. And some of it can be quite sophisticated, purposeful, um, cut and paste. And so that there's gaps, but it's time consuming to fill in the blanks. So, you have how you're going to remedy a book that leaves something out of the index. Well, I think the case is clear that there was a criminal conspiracy in Axis Hollywood that defeated after the Civil War reasserted its power through Hollywood. And then again after World War II, the defeated reasserted their power again through Hollywood. But it's less conspicuous how that works out and plays a role into our culture. Many of us in our communities and in our civics have noted that men who become monks or go into theology are often very good scholars. This is a tradition from medieval era when monks would be protected in their cloisters for study. In fact, Erasmus escaped such a monastery. It still became a shining example of, in fact, the founder of humanist Christian philosophy. So it's no surprise when people who are very thoughtful and deep go in the direction of philosophy and that it's difficult, even though the issues are very clear to them, to uncover what the issues are and what the differences between them are. The differences between schools of thought and Christianity are what one of my pastors calls a discipline to understand. And I know that to be true. I'm not in that discipline. In Hollywood studies, there's a certain tendency to influence cultural affairs that becomes jocular on the level of fraternities, community groups who laugh it up or argue over the meaning of something that happened or the facts concerning what happened or their memories disagree. Um, it might be something as trivial as a conversation they overheard when they were out shopping. No, somebody said this. No, somebody that they didn't say that. They said something else. Disagreement. And there was a movie called Rashomon, which is Japanese, which had people who witnessed and experienced and banned it. Even the spirit of the dead man was brought back to give testimony, and they all disagreed about what took place. Well, it, it's common people who remember the 50s, grew up, came becoming adults in the 50s. When it comes to Huey Long, to be advised of a movie and a book called All the King's Men, because he was called the Kingfish, I think. Every Man a King, No Man Wears the Crown is on YouTube. You can see who he was if you want. But Huey Long was a real Louisiana politician. He was a pretty good ape. And All the King's Men is a work of fiction by Robert Penn Warren. Now, you don't want to pin down somebody's historic reputation on a work of fiction, but this was what was actually done. And the key word there, of course, is Warren. You might get your back up about my saying that because I'm clearly referring to the Warren Report, but something very similar was done to the collective idea of what went on in Dealey Plaza. A fiction was written. And when you get down into Blythe Sanders from the early 20th century, who was a man who was talking with people like Picasso and Prokofiev and Ouspensky and later Henry Miller, and Henry Miller's protege Robert Anton Wilson was influenced by him. Here's Stravinsky. He's talking a lot of Cubists. He started doing with literature what people do with cinema. He used his own name and gave it to people who were fictional, doing fictional things in historical settings that were real and identifiable. And this was what Cubism started doing, influencing, and Italian futurists who were fascists started doing in influencing cinema. He had lost an arm in World War I, but the invisible arm was meaningful to him. His book, Lure, his first novel, was made into a film by Allied powers, but also anonymously by the Axis powers. And you begin to see the shades of what the fourth dimensional crowd meant when they said, when we mistell something, is to show a deeper truth. One can argue that that's not what happens. I knew a librarian who didn't like fiction. He didn't see deeper truths in fiction, no matter how well they were carried out. Thomas Hardy's Far from the Madding Crowd, with its morals of the story endings of the chapters and so on, wasn't charming to him. It was just missing the point, which was to get to know what really happened. He was a fact checker. He liked reality stories, books about what that research things as they were, historical truths. But things appeal to you or brought out of the subconscious, they say, by Hollywood, and to have freedom to mistell stories. Oliver Stone went so far as to say that if it's reported, we have the right to depict it. You can, a hallucination is reported, depict it. And there's films that are full of hallucinations. So the power to induce mass hallucinations becomes apparent something that the voodoo doctors of cinema would covet, and from a superficial look at their characters, play games with and be malicious about. That's one of the reasons I believe we need an administration of oversight over Hollywood. Now, when it comes to the curtain call of the fourth dimension that comes down through the theological assignment that springs at us through strange directions, the alliance that evolved from Sinatra and Francis Ford Coppola into the alliance between Trump, Stone, and Putin, becomes an academic necessity to identify what occult ideas they have in mind when they twist reality in pursuit of what they claim to be a higher truth. Now, I'm not one of these people who faces a philosopher who I admire and says this man is my enemy. I don't work that way. There are things I don't understand. I'm not projecting a doctrine. Bly Sanders, for example, seems like a very good person in a lot of ways most of the time, but not always. Picasso, Ernest Hemingway was an admirer of Cubism. Neither of those men would have for a moment entertained the idea of a message on behalf of totalitarian authority. Neither of them. That doesn't mean they couldn't be deceived by the world around them. Ingrid Bergman, who got her start with UFA. If you don't know what that is, it means Joseph Goebbels cinema in Germany, along with Mariko Rock, you know, glamour Hungarian, I think, from fascist cinema, Nazi cinema. Played Ernest Hemingway's dearly loved first wife, Martha Gellhorn, for whom the Belle Tools was dedicated, who was also a correspondent with me in the film For Whom the Bell Tolls. Double agency got in the back door of Hollywood, and it's a problem. Probably the most mysterious thing that I see in any of this is how the Eurasian community could be calling advocacy for this kind of Access Hollywood occultism, which is clearly a backstab by the totalitarians in America in their interest, and yet they're fighting them. It seems like duplicity. So I discount that could possibly be true. There's something I don't understand. I won't profess to understand it. Things that are done and things that happen in politics and Hollywood are things I would never think of. I don't operate outside of convention. Don't like to. So it's a conventional academic inquiry. For example, if you read All the King's Men, it would be important to ask yourself, what are the differences between this book and the life it supposedly is describing? Huey Long. He's not the name that's given to the man in All the King's Men. What gives Hollywood the right to tamper with a man's name and call him a persona, as these scriptwriters who have tortured me did? And they claim they're illustrating a superior truth by lying about me. Obviously, anybody who that's done to is going to say something has gone wrong. Sometimes in cinema debates, that comes to something like in Amadeus, minor idiosyncratic differences, like the society of the 90s really banged on and on about Oliver Stone's JFK. Is it true? Was it hallucination by Jim Garrison? Really, the film was pretty accurate about Jim Garrison's investigation. It doesn't answer the questions about whether he intimidated witnesses or fabricated the confession by Clay Shaw to be Clay Bertrand. It doesn't resolve those issues. But it accurately represents that those issues were at work in the actual trial of Clay Shaw. That really happened. It wasn't quite as far fetched as all the King's Men. But people will tell you that Oswald did what they claim he did. And they will overlook, because it was largely part of the fabrication about him, that he did, in fact, go to Russia. What's going on? Where these agencies are shuttling back and forth and circling around us, both within and without. This is Trump between Putin 80s. I have nothing against correspondence between leaders. I find it refreshing that they can sometimes get along, but when they demean the meaning of the people whose lives are at stake in their mechanizations, it breaks faith with the hope of the informed humanity who gained some leverage over world affairs through the foundations of the United Nations. And it's important that these mechanizations not abridge the hopes of the human race. I do not know, have not seen any specific examples where lying could present a greater truth. I mean, telling the German officers there's no Jew hiding in the closet when there is might be an example. Where lying to Germans who are out to kill innocent people is a higher truth than to say, oh, yeah, they're in the closet now. But my point is that looking at Gonzo and Dada and surrealism and people laughing it up and just getting carried away doesn't address the academic search for what is going on in this hidden hand super society of leapfrog oligarchs operating behind the scenes with money bags, ripping off museums, attacking students in schools, and all of the rest that comes with a society that's driven by liars. I mean, I grew up listening to the rock music lyrics that were so confusing and yet enticing. That you thought the people who wrote them must have their act together because they were inebriated. And now there's terrible questions about what they've really been doing. Just frightful. So I think these are all issues that need to be considered.